Okay. Looks as though people can, based on what Discord's showing, people should be able to hear. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, all good, Sean. Can hear you.
I can hear you. So we're
Cool.
okay. Looks like we can hear each other. Hopefully other people can hear us too. Okay. So we have a bunch of questions. So let's have a look. Similarly structured as last time, where basically it seems like we got some for F1, some for MotoGP, some for Rev in general. So we'll just kind of do a go game by game, project by project thing. Kind of do it that way, and then I think if time works out well, then it means that we can probably get some questions from whoever's listening.
Sounds good. So I guess most of these questions, the F1 and MotoGP ones are probably directed at you. So why don't I ask the questions and we can go from there, so everyone can hear the questions being asked.
Go for it. Go for it.
Cool. So first question is on F1 Delta time, and they want to know what's the roadmap for new track releases. It would be good to have something set, like one new track each month. Also be good to know when we can expect new rare, epic, legendary, apex track segments.
Okay. So we actually want to release tracks at a much higher kind of rate than one per month. The idea is to kind of, we want to get to a point we were at it, if we go back, it's probably a few weeks now, we were getting to a point where we were almost doing one every couple of weeks. We want to kind of try and get that again. It's mostly just a case of because obviously these are all licensed assets, and there's a lot of different parties involved in getting things through the pipeline and kind of all kind of checked off and stuff like that. So a little bit is always going to be a bit of a kind of an unknown or a variable at least. But we should be releasing Australia on Tuesday. So there's that to come. So that's going to happen. So Australia's going to come along. Beyond that, I mean, like a few tracks that we've been working and kind of like we're polishing them still a little bit more, balancing them out as well. So stuff that's probably going to be coming or appearing in the very like beyond Australia is we're going to have Suzuka. The Canadian circuit as well is probably one that's not too far away. But ultimately, it's just kind of like juggling, making sure that it's balanced and it plays well, like polishing it and ensuring that visually it's what it should be and gameplay wise it's what it should be. And then kind of going through what we need to make sure to ensure that all parties involved are okay with basically what we're about to release. Also, one of the things is, we mentioned about we're changing the event system so that it's kind of less cumbersome in a lot of ways and more the rewards are kind of more immediate and are kind of earned at a much higher rate, and there's something that you can do every single day. And one of the reasons why as well, kind of like we wanted to hold on some of the tracks, even though some may have been ready at that point. So Australia's been kind of there for a little while. It's because we didn't want to add another track into the way the current event system works. So it's quite unwieldy. There's a lot of leaderboards, and it can be difficult to track, especially as we don't have like leaderboards at the very top of this. And it's all kind of very manual work right now. But as it is right now, considering there's still some stuff we need to work out on how the event system works, the new one, we don't want to hold off content if we know it's kind of okay to go. So we should be, and you guys should be able to play Australia kind of next Tuesday, basically. In regards to sales themselves, so like one of the things that's important when we look at sales and stuff like that. So what's great, of course, is the fact that we put out a couple of months worth of earning rewards already for segments that are there as they are. But obviously we do need to kind of compile and put together the next round. But the thing is like it's important to balance sales against utility and kind of gameplay content feature releases and stuff like that as well. So we want to kind of prioritize, at least in the short term, the coming kind of few weeks across all of the projects, the release of features and functions as opposed to kind of the sales essentially. So that's why we're not necessarily looking at a new segment in the immediate, a new segment sale in the immediate, because we just want to kind of handle a few more feature rollouts first before we loop back around on some of that stuff.
Cool. That makes sense. So I guess that's a good F1 Delta time question to kick off with. Why don't we jump over to a MotoGP question? So I guess there's obviously card minting being having gone live last week. I think there are a lot of questions around card minting themselves. So I guess the first one being, how does card print numbers work? How do the card print numbers work? And are those card print numbers predetermined when the packs are minted?
So they are predetermined essentially, at the time of purchase, not related to the pack being minted, but the order of purchase, or at least essentially because the order of purchase is essentially the pack serial. So like if you purchase the 20th pack, the number of the serial on the pack is 20, and that governs the print number of the cards that are inside it. Or at least kind of like the highest governance of those print numbers. What will ultimately set those print numbers? So what it does is that whenever a new pack is added or purchased, it then will be running a randomization on filling the pack with the cards that are applicable against the rarity chart. So for example, it will roll each one of those packs, each one of those cards against a rarity table and against a content table. And then once it lands on each one of those, it then sets a print number based on what has already been supplied to packs prior to it. So the print number is set essentially on pack purchase. They are.
Okay, right. So I guess that's a good roll on into the next question, which is, will there be a number one common Rossi, and will there be like a number one rare Rossi, and so on?
Yes. So basically what it is that every single rarity has its own print counter. So it means that like common, let's say there's 50 cards, common will have 1 to 50, rare will have 1 to 50, epic and legendary will also have 1 to 50. It creates an interesting scenario whereby, if you get let's say if you have print number 88, that's a common for Rossi, somebody might think that has more value in some way than like a print number 204 for a legendary Rossi, right? So every single tier has an opportunity to have another kind of value variable placed alongside it with how it has that print number.
Yeah, that sounds right. So then I guess this next one is if the number one pack, so the number one purchased pack, is never opened, does that mean there will be 3 number one cards missing, or how does that work?
No, that's how it would work. Yeah. So it's kind of like we do not skip over or account for people not opening or accessing certain things. And it's the same right now with F1 Delta Time keys and stuff like that. It's kind of, unless the owner of the asset decides to actually, like use the permission they have over the asset, so it can be opening it, that content does not exist. And that's kind of almost like, what it is to have kind of a true scarcity model. And also kind of a choice of what comes with having kind of true ownership as well. I mean, how we do this in the future, I think we're always going to look and see if it makes sense to revise certain things depending on how well they work or how well they seem to work. But I think there's a lot of stuff related to finite content, ultimately like scarcity and such, and how that can all work together, that has barely been explored. So it's difficult for us to say this is how we're going to do it and do it forever. That would be kind of presumptuous, I think. We'll have an idea and see how well it works, and we'll probably encounter issues with the way that we designed it, like in the future, and we just need to be open to kind of being able to be flexible on that. And when we are flexible on those things, we need to make sure that it's not going to necessarily affect content that people already have. And then if we are doing that, also making sure that everybody's aware of how these changes are kind of going to roll out and what that actually means as well. So we know that like every single thing we do is a learning process, but that shouldn't be taken in a sense that we're also expecting to like everything we do is discardable, or everything we do doesn't have to hit a quality bar, right? Everything we do like is we want it to be the best it can possibly be, and we work incredibly hard to try and do that. We want to make these polished experiences as much as we possibly can. It's kind of we want it to be great. No one wants to do anything that they don't feel proud of doing. But we also know that like blockchain is still super early. The technologies we're using are super early. And it's only going to keep growing, and new voices are going to come in and new ideas are going to pop up. And it's only natural for us to look at what happens and think, yeah, maybe it's time that we rethink some of the stuff that we did.
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess that, there are a couple of questions which are sort of on similar lines with the actual minting of the cards, but I think there's a few other questions here that we can maybe jump to. Maybe an F1 question. I guess one big one is staking for 2020 assets. When could that? When can players expect that to be coming?
Sure. Okay. So staking is, we haven't set 2020 staking yet. So that's why I haven't really said anything about it. But I like what we're looking at now in regards to staking is basically, so there are a few ways that we're thinking of introducing this. We will kind of have systems that allow people to earn rev from staking for sure, because that worked in a way that was interesting, and people liked it, and it worked for us as well. It's kind of overall a good system. We're just not yet kind of planned when the next round would happen and what the content spread and acceptance is going to be. But like one of the things we want to do when we look at staking moving forwards is seeing if there's more variations of what can be generated from staking. And that can come in many forms. So for example, like what if you are staking and instead of, or as alongside earning something, you're generating something at the same time. So we have like some ideas of what we want to, of what we're thinking of doing around this, especially as it comes to new content that we're releasing. But I'm going to have to do a bit of a cop out and say this, a lot of that info we're not yet ready to share because it is still very conceptual stuff. I mean, I will say that staking is going to stick around, but we're just going to modify the different variations related to staking. We're going to change it up a little bit more in how we allow staking to happen, or at least kind of we're going to add to the ways that we allow staking to happen. But as it is right now, we don't yet, and we haven't yet set the next staking pool. We think, I guess, so it's in some ways it's similar to the sales stuff, I guess, a little bit, where essentially like we really want to start putting out and catching up on a bunch of feature related roadmap that we have there, and we just want to kind of start pushing that out and building out the platform much more, putting out those play modes and kind of more general content. And then like as we kind of basically as we fill it out a little bit more, then we'll kind of come back and return to stuff such as staking and another track sale and the next MotoGP pack sale and kind of, all of those other things as well. But it's kind of the status is as such that we want to say, okay, now we want to build and release a little bit for now. That's kind of, we want to kind of catch up on a few things.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I think right now, I think it's yeah, it'd be exciting to get the game going and get new features going. So on that, with MotoGP, I guess when can the players start playing the game? And I know it's going to be a management-based game. On that, are there any? So, is there a plan of having a visual representation of the race, or will it be text-based?
So the management game within, and we'll do something similar. So basically, the scenario that we're in, and this is blockchain games. This is kind of a game development thing overall, where essentially, like everybody is developing in the open right now. So it's not just kind of blockchain titles; it's indie developed titles. It's stuff that gets released on Steam, things like that, early access. So we will have a version of the management game itself, its first iteration around Q4 of this year. That's when we aim to, when that's probably going to start appearing. It'll probably come out and we'd classify it as something akin to kind of a beta phase. It will be. We want to make it very visually rich though as well. So it won't be kind of we're looking at again using similar to what we did with F1 Delta Time, where it'd be like a WebGL thing. So essentially we can embed Unity, but also alongside kind of embedding stuff into browsers and things like that. We're also looking at developing kind of executables, independent downloads, stuff like that, because then we there's less weight to running any of the games that we build. But yeah, it's we're looking at. I mean, we with these cards, we've rendered and built out a bunch of very very cool, like super cool, like 3D assets for them, and we want to use those as much as possible. I mean, due to the nature of how they're going to be rendered, there's going to be a different level of detail that's displayed within the game. But the idea is for it to have like a 3D kind of representation of the race that you manage when you're playing the game. Prior to that itself, we want to look to put out something in Q3 that is essentially MotoGP's version of time trial, where people who have been coming in and they have their cards prior to like more of the game related, like directly game related assets being released, will use kind of the cards, look to use the cards in a more direct manner for kind of a play experience. And ultimately, when that experience exists and the management experience exists, they're complementary to each other. So there's something we want to look to do. So think of the MotoGP Ignition's version of the time trial around Q3-ish. And then the first look at the management game, which will be 3D and rendered in 3D around Q4.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. Sounds good. I'm excited to hopefully get on track and play that as well. So will there be track segments or the event segments, let's say for MotoGP, similar to F1 Delta Time?
Yeah, they will. I think kind of like we track segments. The way that the segments are kind of could potentially be used, the amount of segments, let's say per track, we may adjust that depending on the property or depending on kind of like how they kind of like the ownership behavior of them and stuff like that. But I think like the concept of land in the NFT space is fascinating and one of the most interesting things that can exist. And we will continue doing that with everything we do.
Yeah, cool. It's definitely, I think that's just from a kind of racing game standpoint. Having played that my whole life, I think it's definitely a very fascinating way of incorporating that kind of true ownership, and not just ownership of the cars and bikes that you're driving on track, but the actual real estate itself, which is it's a fascinating concept. So I guess going back to F1, and I know this has kind of been addressed a fair few times, but I guess multi-accounting has been an issue, obviously, and that's quite a big one that pops up fairly often. So I guess what are the steps that we're taking to prevent that? Whether that's same team racing multiple accounts or preventing bots and AI.
Yeah, so so if it's true bots and AI stuff, the way that we counter that, moving as we go forwards and flesh out the game more and more, is essentially the way that we manage to switch the game to run entirely on a server as opposed to within a client, as it partially does at the moment. There's also message signing, and we're now looking at kind of pushing certain levels of final results on chain as well. That's going to be a little bit time before we actually do that, and we wouldn't do that on Ethereum anyway. We'd only do that once we kind of get stuff on Polygon or other blockchains. And then in regards to kind of multi-accounting stuff, so one of the things that we were going to do, always looking to do, but it kind of like when it was able to roll out, I guess, is that we have what we call a token lock. And this was mostly in response to preventing certain things happening within time trial. So like what can be done in time trial is that somebody could, for example, if they have a perfect setup, they could transfer a number of tokens over to another account and run that setup again. So the way that the token lock works is that if a token has been detected as having played on that race already within that 24-hour time frame, it wouldn't be usable again until 24 hours have passed. It doesn't stop the token being traded or sold. And obviously what's important is making sure that we kind of have some kind of icon or visual representation to make sure people understand that what they could be purchasing is an item that they can't use immediately. So that's something that we have been working on a little bit. We want to look to put that out. I think it's just a matter of testing right now. That's the main thing. It's just kind of testing on it more than anything else. But then the bigger kind of, obviously multi-accounting, we have it in our terms. It's something that we just do not allow. We investigate when we get people kind of bring it to us and with suspicions of multi-accounting, and like it's super critical to us that we do investigate these very, very seriously, because we gain nothing from having an unfair game. So we definitely take everything that we see, but we got to be careful because ultimately, like when we have kind of taken action in regards to multi-accounting before, it is kind of pretty severe. So we need to be sure that what we're doing, the action that we take, is kind of 100% like reinforced with, information and evidence that we think kind of really does back up the kind of claim. But as we go forwards, one of the things that's going to be, and we don't have all the answers to this yet, but we are going to be introducing a teams concept, which is kind of the ecosystem's equivalent to clans, essentially. And the purpose of those types of teams is to allow people to be able to use like a shared well of assets between them and how they can use them and kind of benefit from having more people in their group, not only just because they can race together and stuff like that, but also kind of, maybe one guy has a real great kind of collection of NFTs, but he doesn't want to play or he's not very good. So we want to allow that person to be able to supply NFTs, but still maintain full ownership of them, right? And what that could. So there's a few things that, like, when we look long term, we're looking at with the concepts of teams in mind. In the short term, we do have the NFT lock that we want to push out. And then from a game perspective, ultimately, like, security is by running it on the server and catching certain events. And if certain events are too consistent, we have basically systems where we can flag if it is consistent in a manner that means that it is kind of a bot or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure. I think that's probably good for a lot of the players to know. I think that's definitely been a topic of discussion. So yeah, no, that's it's great answers there, and I think once those begin to roll out, I think that'll make a big difference. So there's one question here for me, which I might just jump on, which is, regarding the news about Montoya. So Juan Pablo Montoya obviously was recently announced as, I guess, one of our drivers with Rev. He's joined the REVV Motorsport family, and so has his son Sebastian. Sebastian had a really good weekend last weekend and finished on the podium twice out of 3 races. So that's pretty good news. And they've got the Rev logo on the helmets, which is pretty cool. So I guess the community wants to know if there's any updates or efforts being made to bring on more riders or drivers, and what are some of the struggles with onboarding them. So to answer that, yes, there's definitely, we're definitely looking at bringing on more riders and drivers. Right now, we're in discussions with a number of athletes in the space, and that will range across series like NASCAR and F1 and XF1. Potentially some of the older guys and even some of the potential up and comers, and across the board with MotoGP and potentially further down the order as well with Moto2 and Moto3. So yeah, there definitely there are a lot of efforts being made to kind of get in touch with these guys and bring them into the ecosystem. And I guess they're the struggles with onboarding them. I'd say they're all very they're all very open, and they're all very excited about the space and very excited about blockchain and NFTs. But I guess one thing they want to understand, I guess, the longevity of it, obviously, and their brand is very important to them, and how that gets translated through our ecosystem and through our games is very important. So I guess that's the biggest thing, and the biggest thing that they want to know is um, how they get represented. But yeah, I mean, keep your eyes and ears to the announcements, close to the announcements, because we should be bringing in a few more guys fairly soon, I'd say. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. So it's past now, so I guess we have time for another couple questions for you, Sean. And then we might open it up to the floor and get some of our community members in here as well.
Okay.
So gas fees, it's another topic of discussion. So it's obviously been low recently, which is nice. But when it does eventually rise, what are the plans to assist with key openings, and are there any updates on the kind of layer 2 side of things?
Sure. So I don't know if we mentioned this, but like basically we believe that so we have 2 primary contracts that we are getting audited. One of them is the Rev contract, and it's a modified Rev contract that includes a meta transaction, and its purpose is for it to exist on Polygon. Even though the fees are very low on we still don't want users to need to have Matic to process transactions. There's onboarding stuff that we can do to make sure they do have Matic, but ultimately long term, if they've got Rev, they can use that and it's going to cover fees. Similarly, with the 1155 contract that we are putting on Polygon, that is also going through audit. I think the audit is actually scheduled to start within like a week. But basically, that's the same thing where it's a modified version of a contract that includes meta transactions in a way that means that it can work on Polygon, where Rev is essentially serving as the currency of transaction and fee. So that's realistically, these audits take quite a while. I mean, it can be like around a month, depending on kind of the complexity of it, just to get the audit done. I mean, the contract that we put out on Polygon for the first rounds of Rev NFTs that we're going to be doing, that is a temporary contract, and there will be a migration to the new optimized contract once the new optimized contract exists. But as things still will remain on Ethereum, I guess, for at least the time being, we were looking at a way that we automate. So one of the problems that we have is that compensation for opening keys is totally fine for us to do, and like that's why we did it in the first place. It's just there's an overhead to it sometimes, and what we're looking at occasionally is seeing, okay, is there a way that we can do this so it's kind of automated or contract related? But ultimately, that means that it's due to it being contract related work. It often means that it's kind of a push pull with other resources and kind of targets that we're building anyway. So long story short, it's very unlikely that we're going to continue to put stuff directly on Ethereum. We're already kind of very much moving everything forward in regards to non-Ethereum chains. Obviously, like Flow being a considerable thing that we're looking at, and Polygon, we're already getting the contracts all sorted for it. But in the event that there is a scenario where gas goes up again and we have players coming in from Ethereum with F1, we would do another gas opening kind of key opening initiative. That's something we're definitely open to doing again.
Okay, awesome. So something you mentioned just then was the Rev NFTs. How much can you kind of share on what's coming with Rev Motorsport?
So we have our target for play is kind of like during this summer. That's what we're aiming for. So there's going to be a gameplay mode that people can use Rev NFTs to play the game. Right now, we're looking at only for the foreseeable, for the coming period of time, where we're creating Rev specific NFTs. So this won't include any potential licenses that we bring in. It's the ones that we're doing and creating original content for. We're looking at allowing them to be earnable, right? So it's earnable in many different ways, through the concept of work via gameplay, for example. That's one way that you can get them. Ownership plus the concept of work via gameplay is another way that people can own them. So, for example, if they have a token within their wallet and they compete in F1 Delta time, then that means that they can earn a specific type of NFT for doing so. So that's kind of how we look, that we're going to be basically allowing people to get this content in the coming kind of month or so ahead of the game actually releasing. The idea is for Rev Motorsport, as the gameplay aspect, is to be far more achievable to play for more and more people. Not only from transaction fees, but just the cost of entry being considerably lower. But they are NFTs, and we want to keep this interesting, and we want to make it kind of add something there that kind of, even though you may have your NFT, there's reason why you may, regardless of kind of, it being a common asset or not. And that's kind of what we referred to when we're talking in the I think it was in the announcement that we put out, where we're talking about the tag. So the competitor tag is specific for this event's available NFTs. They won't be issued again. There will be tokens under a different tag. And these tags, we are looking at, basically they're going to give you access to ways that your NFTs can potentially kind of, let's say, progress, I suppose, in a manner. But the tag becomes important. And the tag becomes like, and other assets within the Rev ecosystem could also be important for how tags kind of, let's say, like resonate. There's a lot of stuff that we're still kind of basically looking at from a contract perspective, saying, okay, what kind of smart contracts do we need to ensure that all this can be managed and run and governed in the way that we need it to? Obviously, also doing so with it being optimized and with as little manual overhead as possible, purely for the reason to make sure that it's efficient. So there's some stuff that we've yet to kind of truly settle on, but things that we are kind of decided on is that tags are going to be an important kind of part of these tokens, the ones that we're issuing. And for the foreseeable, these are all going to be earnable NFTs for the time being. We're not going to be kind of putting a batch of them on sale. And kind of there'll be more interesting ways to earn them outside of just kind of gameplay hooks, but they'll probably come a little bit later. So there's a lot of unanswered stuff there, but
Yeah.
we need to look at how some of these contracts can work and what that means in regards to timelines before we settle on some of the direction we go with it.
Okay, awesome. Well, I guess since we've got just over 20 minutes left, we can probably open it up for a couple questions. If you're happy to do that.
Go for it. I mean, you can answer them. So yeah, I don't mind, right? If you're the one who's going to answer them ultimately, it's okay. Let's see. Does anyone want to ask? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Be a question for Matt.
You can go get a drink of water. Crows. Does that work? Hang on.
I think that's what you do, right? And then maybe they can.
I'll press the button.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Just a question on the use of the tracks in F1DT. Will there be other uses, or will they be solely for F1DT?
Good question. Do you want to answer this, Matt, or do you want me to do it?
You can.
Okay. So ultimately, it depends on the track. So one thing to bear in mind is like there's a very specific way that we present the tracks in F1 Delta Time, where basically they are Formula One events, right? So that is kind of like a specific thing. So from that perspective, they are usable within F1. But like one of the initiatives that we have right now, as well as kind of like Matt touched on, that we're talking to drivers and stuff like that. And obviously we talk with teams and manufacturers. We talk to circuit and event organizers as well, right? So ultimately, like we're looking to allow ourselves to have more ways that we can utilize like circuit ownership, right? And what that can mean. But also outside, if it's just within a single ecosystem or works in the single ecosystem in a specific way, there are other ways that we can basically use those NFTs outside of that ecosystem in a different kind of way, if it might end up being the case. But like, for example, like let's say if you have, you can earn dividends through the ownership of it within F1 Delta Time, or you could potentially stake that segment within REVV Motorsport, and through doing that, you could earn a passive, either an additional dividend or a different type of passive earning towards other types of content as well. Again, like some of this stuff is things that we're still kind of working through and working out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like we want to ensure that everything issue and we allow people to own has more value and more utility constantly. We don't want things to have a single use, whether it be cars or parts or tracks or anything like that. The whole idea of us being able to bring in multiple titles means that we can leverage them to add more and more utility. And that's like one of the core things with REVV Motorsport as a platform itself, is where we have kind of a lot of more freedom in regards to kind of how we build features to add more flexibility to the NFTs that people own as well.
Okay, great. So they won't be, so for Formula E, for example, they won't use the F1 tracks?
Formula E has its own set of circuits. It does. We're still kind of finalizing all of the circuits that would be included there, similar with MotoGP as well, because they have their own set of circuits too. There's obviously overlap here and there, and like ultimately, like we have a scenario where essentially, like if you own a segment, then that segment is, because what we don't want to do is like what we always wanted to kind of push through is that this track, regardless of how it's accessed from a play perspective, is limited to the amount of assets that it's sold in initially. So that means that There are 330 segments of this circuit forever. And then from that point on, everything else kind of taps into it in different ways, not always from a pure racing perspective, but in a different. So some of that stuff is going to be ultimately like conversations with like, MotoGP and Formula E and saying, okay, how about like these are some of the things that we want to look to do, and see if we can actually do one-to-ones. In some ways that's a possibility. But in other ways, if there's not a true one-to-one, then we do an abstracted version of that instead. But for sure, it's kind of like what's important is that anything that we've issued never loses utility, and it only ever gains utility.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Pros. All right. We have a crypto wordsmith who wants to ask a question. Everyone else, feel free to chime in as well, but I'm inviting Mr. Crypto Wordsmith. I think you're, yeah, there you go. Can you hear him, Sean?
No.
Hello? Might just have to check your settings there. Nope. All right. Why don't you just check your settings real quick, and we'll pull you back in if you've got that working. So I guess let me see. So yeah, crypto wordsmith, you might just have to go to your settings and select the audio input and output devices. But yeah, anyone else, if you've got any questions, feel free to chime in now. We've got the one and only Zeronium here, who is the master of all answers and master of all questions, I guess. Let me see if there are any more questions on this sheet here. All right. So Stingray's got a question, so we'll pull him in. Hello, Mr. Stingray.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, my apologies in advance if this is kind of a dumb question, but I'm a new user and I actually just found out about this just this week. So just been doing research and I'm really excited and I've actually gotten some good answers. But my general question is, when will we be able to open packs? Because like I'm really itching to buy, and I know you guys have probably answered this already. And I saw that like we can get packs minted right now, but I've also noticed like on Twitter and even just like doing like a simple command search like history, it looks like it's been like delayed a couple times. So my general question is, how long have packs been available, and have people ever been able to even open them to begin with?
No, they haven't been opened yet. So I can't remember the dates. I think we sold the first ones. So we did two sales. I think one was end of March, and then the other one was kind of beginning of July, perhaps something like that. I think they had like a 2-3 week time frame because we needed to improve the way that we sold packs after the first sale because of issues with payments being processed. And basically, it's kind of like a huge demand on a system that we built that wasn't built for that kind of basically usage at that time. So we had to rebuild the thing. Alongside doing that, we were also building out our smart contracts. Right now, I think we have 4 independent contracts, but the 2 that we're working on, which is kind of important here, is the pack contract and the card contract. So the pack contract, we deployed all contracts of viewing about a week and a half ago, maybe, I think, or maybe 2 weeks ago. And obviously, like following that, we then minted the packs, or we kind of placed packs to be mintable, because just, you know, people needed to create, basically provision their Flow wallet to be able to receive a collection, which was our kind of pack collection, essentially, the NFTs themselves. So right now, actually looking at that, I think there's still around 8,000 packs yet to be provisioned and set up for mint. So there's still like a big chunk of people who have yet to kind of claim their packs. But those contracts, both pack and card, are being upgraded right now. Which is a good thing that you can do that on Flow, but basically there's better ways that we can optimize them. So we're improving them at the moment, making them kind of, and there's some stuff regarding how the metadata is ultimately going to be structured that we want to rework as well. So that's kind of part of the reason why we're kind of still kind of going through that. We have scheduled a testnet mint of cards this week. So we are kind of like, when we talk about like doing this month, it's something we're super serious of looking to achieve. So yeah, like our test mint of cards is kind of this coming month. And then there's a whole bunch of testing, because we need to make sure that the drop rate is as it's supposed to be. The print numbers work as they're supposed to. So basically the entire supply, and kind of make sure that they basically increment the number each time that something exists. And then, yeah, we're still, and we're doing some final work, and we're doing some final polish on the assets themselves, the visuals of them too. Because all of them, they're not videos, they're not moments that we've edited from like, it's not an NBA Top Shot kind of video moment. These are kind of custom created 3D video animations. So they're all completely unique. So there's that work there as well that we're still polishing on. But yeah, we're definitely like, our goal right now within the team is we do this month. Yeah, and we're doing basically the minting of the cards. We're doing those test mints basically within this week.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and welcome to the ecosystem.
Thank you. Yeah, super excited.
Awesome.
Cool.
So yeah, I've got 10 minutes to go. You know, anyone else, if they've got any final questions? Crow's got another one, so let's pull him back in.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I figured since nobody else was asking, I will. Just a general sort of question about REV. So REV, has been sort of quite high in the past, up around the 60 cents, sort of sat around 20, 30 cents for quite a while, and is now down around 8 or 9. The interest in REV seems to have never been higher since I started playing about 3 or 4 months ago. Do you have an explanation as to why REV is low at the moment compared to the perceived interest in it?
So I mean, like, obviously, like, the market kind of sucks at the moment, but also like it's not kind of, and it's not as though we're kind of oblivious to kind of, the vibe that kind of gets sent out there when we have to delay things, right? And that does put a dampener on stuff. And we understand that people might, due to that, think, oh, I don't want to hold on to my rev, and it sucks. It's kind of definitely not what we want to try and do, and it's never part of like what we're trying to build either. But that's always a possibility alongside kind of the market itself not being in a great position. But I think kind of like, and some of this maybe is on our own side, that we're still figuring out how best to message this more, is how kind of wide the entire ecosystem is for us. Like we have, and some of the things that we do right now, and kind of like, yes, F1 is kind of like a super kind of hyper focused, hyper enthusiastic, but overall kind of relatively on the smaller side in regards to play audience. But then on the other side of that, we have MotoGP that has around 7,000 independent owners, right, of assets. And then we have we're basically allowing people to earn huge rewards as due to the play to earn systems that we have, and then through ownership, whether it be car staking or track ownership and stuff like that. So I think like some of the stuff that exists today that I still think is still quite unique to us, because I think something that we wanted to do when we first launched Rev was make sure it had utility, and it did. It had day one utility. People could actually spend Rev directly in F1 with purchasing time trial tries. That was immediately there. And like as we go on, we've always looked to add more and more utility to it. But there are big features that essentially add an incredible amount of utility. One such thing being kind of a bridged Rev that has utility in a marketplace for MotoGP is a substantial thing. And then kind of related to that, the wider ecosystem of what Formula E is going to be offering, and then what the Rev Motorsport gameplay is just like much higher. It's not relying just on F1 Delta. There is kind of a lot on its shoulders at the moment because it's the most mature of the titles that we have in the works. So I think it's kind of like there's always going to be like it's always kind of, like I said, it sucks when we're not able to release what we want to release when we plan to. It's understandable if that's kind of, some people have taken that as a negative and wanted to kind of think, okay, for now at least they're okay to walk aside from Rev. But also I think there's still a bunch of work that we need to do, not only on releasing and building stuff, but also just kind of messaging what today. And what's there today and what people can do today, like through like the play to earn systems and stuff like that, and how like Formula E and MotoGP and like these new Rev NFTs are all part of the same system, where Rev is the only currency that you can actually use to interact with it completely. And that's something we need to do a little better. And once we get better at that and people kind of understand what this is as a platform, I think kind of sentiment on Rev will be much stronger. And then obviously like the persistent utility will kind of maintain a far more kind of solid value with the token as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, so essentially, yeah, because I see it similar, that there is a lot of use for Rev, and that's why I was a bit surprised with so much interest at the moment in Rev, that it has dropped so much. But you just simply feel as though it's a bit due to the delayed releases, essentially.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised on it. And again, two things. It's I'd say overall it's a combination of three, where one, the market is what it is. Two, there's probably some people who took some of the delays and kind of felt it was time to check out, which is that's going to happen. And then the third one is that I think that some things that we just need to be far more kind of clear on messaging and making sure people do understand how wide this ecosystem is, and how it all uses the single kind of token to interact with it, right? And that's kind of pretty special. But I think we need to kind of, and it's a difficult thing to message, I think, too. That's something we need to kind of be able to do and summarize better. But yeah, there's a few things we know we need to kind of work on to make it kind of much louder than it is.
Perfect. Great answer. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Crows.
Thank you.
So I think we've got time for one final question. There's one from SpeedTech Brock, so we'll pull him in and then probably call it a day after that.
You hear me okay?
Can hear you, yeah.
Cool. I just had one question around the event segment, tying, I guess, to that conversation. So obviously we had the manual payment for, I think, the 2 months worth, maybe it was March, April, I forget, which was very well received, which I think, given the given the player base that we have at the moment and what those payouts were, I think, very encouraging for future, for the future for those track owners or segment. I was just wondering what the plan was. Obviously, we're moving to a claim system. regarding manual payments up until we have a claim system, and just the schedule and how that might work, and then also if there was any update on the claim is to be put in place.
Sure. So we've been testing the claim system. We've been testing it. What do we do? So the claim system, as it manages fees, it's something that we need to have certain accounting reference points within it. So, for example, like we have a version, we're running a version that's essentially on REVV at the moment. That we've been playing around with, and essentially what it is that you generate a route because we use a Merkle drop for it. That's what makes it claimable, and then you upload that, which then has all of the wallets based on a report that we output and all of the rev that they are going to be able to claim. One of the things that it does is that it kind of rewrites the drop. So, for example, it means that like if somebody didn't claim previously for whatever reason, they don't have kind of two separate claims that they need to manage. Instead, it overrides it and just kind of stacks on top a larger claim. So that's one of the things that we've been kind of testing a little bit more and making sure can work. But yeah, it's kind of it's in test. I mean, I think like what we plan to do, and this isn't something that we only use for Fiverr. Ultimately, like we will kind of have it adopted across the Animoca brands kind of titles as they need it or as they use it. But I think where we are right now, development-wise, hopefully, like we might be looking at a release of it in July. I think ultimately that's a possibility for sure. And the way that it works is essentially because it is a claim, it does mean that there is a gas fee on the side of the claimant. So there's a fee that does need to be covered. We obviously have and always like look to plan, and this is the same when it goes to Polygon as well. The meta transaction and being enabled, so people can kind of use Rev as opposed to having to use Ethereum or having kind of Matic to do that stuff. But yeah, it's the way that it is that all of your, whether through gameplay or asset ownership, basically get pulled and then are available for you to just kind of click on it. Basically the same as it currently works with staking. But it's now coming from multiple sources instead of just one. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with it. So yeah, we're in test mode with it, and then I think it's progressed pretty well, and I think July is very, very likely for it to kind of go out.
That's good. And given, let's just assume July for now, would we look at, one final manual? So looking at just doing one final manual distribution prior to that, or you would just wait? If it was going to be in July, you'd just wait and have it claimable? No,
we'll look to continue to, because July is still like a month, right? So it's a bit of time for people to wait, and like we really don't like it when as much as you guys really dislike the fact that you need to wait for the rewards, we also do not like how long it takes us sometimes, and it's just ensuring that everything is correct, because sometimes it is kind of a considerable amount of funds that we need to move. So we just need to kind of double, triple check all of this stuff constantly. And we do want to make sure everybody kind of is able to get hold of as soon as possible everything that they kind of, they're justified for and they own and they've earned. So, that's probably does mean that we are going to do another event segment drop prior to claiming coming out. Because yeah, it's just I don't think, unless I'm forgetting something. I don't think so. I don't hope so. I think there's nothing stopping us doing another drop as opposed to waiting for that to come out, because unfortunately, target is July. I'm confident July can be hit, but if for whatever reason that's not the case, I don't want to be hung up on saying, okay, you guys, now you need to wait another month because we can't deliver on our side, right? So I always want to make sure that we can be flexible on that.
No problem. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you everyone for the questions, and thanks for joining the Dev Hour. I'm I'm pretty sure we're going to have this as a common occurrence. So yeah, we'll let you know and keep you guys updated on any future development hours that we decide to do. And yeah, make sure you guys have some questions for us. That if we aren't able to answer in the Discord chats, this is a good time for you guys to come and have a chat with us. So thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Matt.
We'll speak again on here soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.